Alright, so I got back from locals not too long ago, and I played Ragnaloard today, or locals is on Thursday. I have no idea what day this video is going up. Ragnaloard is a deck that I believe has actually been really solid ever since we first got the structure deck. But when we first got it, I think a lot of the ways people built it were not very conducive to its actual game plan, and this includes the way I built the deck initially, because I didn't realize that there were BT3 cards. So I'm going to start off with the BT3 Ludamon. You could run this, you could also run the BT3 Zubamon, you could do a 2-2 split, you can run less of this to run more of the other rookies, it's really up to you. I run 2 copies of the promo Zubamon, which we will discuss in a moment, and then we're on 3 and 3 of the EX6 cards. So I'll move these a little bit, right? And the last rookie I'm on is Spada. So a really big thing to remember with this deck is you are going to be using these for their hand effect, and this thing can also go into your sources to stack your top deck in a more optimized way. There are reasons to care about this just in terms of digivolving up the line, but there is another card that this matters a whole lot for. We'll get to in just a bit. So I'm actually going to leave this over here. I've seen some people cut down on this. I think the digging 5 and adding 2 is just really, really good. Especially when you want to see so many pieces in this deck. Being able to grab the Ragnar for free and then pick up something else is really nice. Unfortunately, you can't grab your options with that card, but that's okay. Ooh, that's level 5s. That's not what I want to show right now. We have level 4s being the Zuba Eagermon and the Ludamon from EX6. Again, they largely go without saying, and sorry for slamming into my stand. And then for level 5s, we have the ST13 Duramon and the Raji Ludamon. Now, I think there is a good argument to keep in the EX6 Duramon. You can shove it to gain security attack, and then it also trashes an opponent's security. Very, very good. But I found that in terms of playing the deck out and maybe even getting a wide board, this thing is much more effective, and it's also a reason you may opt to run 4 copies of the ST13 Brare Lujamon instead of 3 the way I am. So do consider that. But yeah, this is the card that I will set up with Promo Zuba. Promo Zuba is also just really nice because it's a card you can spit back to your hand repeatedly for the sake of your Kakenmon Digisama to gain memory every turn. It's also a way to potentially put your opponent on 1 in the event they don't have a tamer. I think it's just really, really useful. Of course, you can shove your other level 3s, but maybe you want to conserve them for some reason or another, or you need to activate multiple different effects and you don't want to use your more expensive ones because you need to conserve your level 6s or something like that. Whatever makes the most sense. But yeah, the fact that you can digivolve into all of your level 6s for a cost of 3 as long as this thing moves up is really, really nice, since the ones I'm running are 3 more Brave Lujamons, this time the EX6 one, and then 4 copies of Durandamon for a total of 10 level 6s. Yeah, just being able to evo into them for 3 means you can very frequently keep turn on them and then go into your BT3 Ragnaloard. This is effectively going to be free most of the time, so that's really, really nice. But also in the event that you digivolve into this guy and you play one off the top because you set it up or you just lucked into it, because sometimes that will happen, you get to digivolve into what you're missing, also for 3, so you pass your opponent to 3. But at that point, you can DNA digivolve and hard make one of the aces or the older ST Ragnaloard one. Now, this card I did not actually run at locals tonight. I definitely should have. It would have made one of my games a little bit easier, but I also straight up lost to not being mindful. I'll talk about that in a moment. Crimson Blaze is very good, but I've come to find that in the vast majority of matchups where I would want Crimson Blaze, there are ways for me to just not really care about what my opponent's doing anyway. Or I guess not care isn't entirely correct, but there are ways to play through stuff like the Omnimon X play when you're facing off against Royal Knights. So yeah, 6 Ragnalords total I think is also fine. The other card I'm running that is a bit weird aside from this is Salvation. Now, a lot of people I've seen say Salvation is not that good of a card. It's something that you kind of use as a crutch, so on and so forth. And I don't really think that's the case. This is also another thing that allows you to make a wider board in those instances where you would want to do that. It can shove sources from trash, right? Its security effect, I mean, its main effect actually does activate when it's checked in security, so that's actually pretty huge. That can give you some defensive capability. But because of how it's worded, I don't know why I keep putting it down, it says when one of your Digimon would leave the battle area. So you can potentially block with this, right? Intentionally being smaller than an opponent's body. And from there, you're in the process of being deleted. You can trigger one or potentially both of these, spit out some sources, and then protect yourself anyway with the Raiji Ludomon effect. Where'd you go? There. I'm blind. Oh yeah, I picked it up already. No, I didn't pick it up. It's right here. But yeah, you can protect yourself with the Raiji Ludomon inheritable by trashing one of your sources. So you get out some free bodies, and your opponent now has to contend with you having these extra level 6s. And initially that might not seem like that big of a deal, but you can Digivolve on top of them with the BT23 Ragnaloards and do that for free. And they're faced with these really big bodies that already have 2 security attack and reboot and can very easily get access to blocker thanks to this thing. And they could also potentially deal with you hard DNAing into any of these. And also because you can relatively easily shove extra sources, sometimes you'll just sit on these, this thing will be in your hand, you can pump it up, right? In terms, like literally you can pump it up in terms of DP if you really wanted to, but you can pump up one of your 6s or both of them potentially before doing the DNA Digivolution so that this thing can trash more security and delete more bodies. That is a bit of a greedier play, but sometimes it does come up, sometimes it does matter. Sometimes you might opt to, like, you see this thing go to trash, you might opt to use this to shove it under, just because if your little body, your level 3 or whatever, is deleted, you can spit this out. Same thing goes for this, but this is really interesting to me because it can potentially be a double attacker or a double blocker, depending on the circumstance. This is also one of the reasons why it's very worth it to keep the promo Zubamon in. It's the only way for you to get raid on this and your Brightweight Ludramons, and sometimes your smaller bodies, depending on if you're on the black sources or not. If you don't want to shove things repeatedly, that also comes up. If you're sitting on this potentially, because that could happen, the raid can matter a whole lot. But yeah, I think the deck is just something that's consistently been very underrated, and I kind of understand why. Like, you have a little bit of gotcha RNG mechanics, and that I think gives the idea that the deck is somewhat inconsistent. Then on top of that, the starter deck itself wasn't that great on its own, but the moment you slot these in, it was much better. I will say the deck did have some issues before. This is actually something I've talked about with friends a lot. Dual color decks like this, even if they're not necessarily doing DNA plays, struggled for a really long time because you just have pure red and pure black cards throughout the entirety of this deck. You could have pure yellow and pure green. You can't really benefit from these standard memory boosts, and as such, a lot of the time you could whiff searches. So I did at one point run a heavy black base Ragnaloard build. This was around BT10, and I played into Eagle's Nest a couple of times. I had, I think, a number of decent matchups, but I unfortunately wasn't ever able to take it to an event because I believe that was around the time they started doing the monocolor Ultimate Cups, and I kept missing regionals. Genuinely, I think, yeah, regionals applications would open usually while I was at work, and I was working in a warehouse at the time. So by the time I would go on lunch break to be able to sign up, which was almost always like 20 minutes later, I just couldn't. Even if I would get the notification, sometimes the site would just load too slow for me. because of where I was working at. And yeah, I was just uninterested in participating in the Ultimate Cups because as cool as I think some of the monocolored decks were, I could not actually play the things I really wanted to. So there was that. Currently though, because of the inherent protections you have access to, this, and this, as well as Teolutamon, you can even have multiple instances of this. I think the deck can perform very well, but you also need to pilot it well. Like, again, I was playing against Lucemon, and the issue I ran into was slamming into security and hitting a 16k when my Ragnaloard ace was only 15. I thought I had a DP inheritable, but I should have just paid more attention. I was just... The locals we go to closes kind of variably. Generally speaking, they close at 10, but sometimes they'll host us for longer. But they were trying to get on with the rounds and things were going really, really slow. So I was just rushing. I wasn't thinking. So don't do what I did, right? If you are playing against something, a deck that you know has potentially bigger security, just be safe. Err on the side of caution. Because another reason I wasn't really too concerned with it at the moment, I'm just like, okay, let me just like rush this through because I know I have a game plan. I saw 3 safe mode in security, and I'm very used to people only running 3 or 4. So I was like, there's not a high likelihood I'm going to have to deal with this, right? I was wrong. But yeah, I really enjoy this deck. It's something that I feel like I don't get to play in person all that often because I try to rotate through my decks a lot at locals. But, yeah, nonetheless, I do think it has the capability to perform in the current format. A lot of the effects that the CS and Hootie deck would attempt to apply to you as far as Digimon go only last during their turn, and I don't believe I've seen any particularly common trend with aces, so you don't really have to worry about that as much on your turn. But if you do, you can, you know, hit them with the Teolutamon, you swing at me instead of me swinging at you thing, and swing things in your favor. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to hit hiccups. The deck, even though you do have a decent amount of immunity, it has some pitfalls. It has weaknesses that can be exploited, and that's another reason that you are heavily rewarded if you pilot it very well, if you have backups. And I think that's also a reason that Salvation is a really, really good card to be looking into, because it's not just potentially insurance. It opens up more avenues for you to engage with the opponent. You can force them into awkward situations and make them make difficult decisions. Sometimes they'll read appropriately into what you're doing or what you have access to, and other times they won't. Same thing goes with you reading into the opponent. Like, I think the Lucemon game, now that I think about it, could have ended, yeah, because I was talking with Shaq, because he was the one who was playing it, about it. Shaq is a guy at Models. So he was running one copy of the EX10 Beelzemon Ace, and I was really concerned about him going into it. He kept going back into the Lucemon, and because I lost that body, the bigger issue with me losing the ace was not the ace itself. It was just that the way the stack was set up meant that I could keep putting back the thing I needed into my hand and then keep going at it security. So while he could progressively heal up to some degree, I could keep de-digivolving the Lucemon and just swinging out with like 3-4 bodies as I continue to make my board a little bit wider. So even if I potentially lost something, I would largely be okay. But yeah, mistakes are made, and you know, that's part of the reason why we go to locals to play test and practice and stuff like that. And even, you know, aside from locals, make sure to play test with your friends.